The day our lives changed forever started like any other ordinary morning. My wife, Elena, was standing in the kitchen making tea, humming softly the way she always did. The sunlight came through the window and touched her silver hair, making it shine. For 35 years I had watched that same gentle routine, her quiet humming, the smell of tea, the soft smile she always gave me when I walked into the kitchen. That morning she looked a little tired, but Elena had always been the kind of woman who hid her pain. All her life she had lived for one purpose, our children. She sacrificed everything for them. She worked late nights sewing clothes to help pay their school fees. She skipped buying things for herself so they could have better shoes, better books, better opportunities. When they were sick, she stayed awake all night beside their beds. When they succeeded, she cried tears of joy like their victories were her own. To her, they were never a burden. They were her whole world. So when she told me quietly, "I think we should go to the doctor today," I felt a strange knot form in my chest. Elena never went to the doctor unless something was seriously wrong. We sat together in the waiting room of the hospital that afternoon. The smell of disinfectant filled the air, and the walls were painted a dull shade of white that somehow made everything feel colder. Elena held my hand the entire time. Her fingers were trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. "Maybe it's nothing," she whispered with a small smile. I nodded, trying to believe her, but deep inside, something told me that our lives were about to change. An hour later, we were sitting in the doctor's office. The doctor was a middle-aged man with tired eyes. He looked at the papers in his hand for a long moment before speaking. That silence alone was enough to make my heart pound. Then he sighed. "I'm very sorry," he said gently. "The tests confirm it. It's cancer." For a moment, the entire world seemed to stop. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Tick, 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 but everything else felt distant and unreal. Elena didn't say anything at first. She simply looked down at her hands resting in her lap. Her shoulders were still, her face calm, but I knew her well enough to see the quiet storm inside her. "How bad is it?" I finally asked, my voice barely steady. "It's aggressive," the doctor said. "But there are treatment options. Chemotherapy could help. The sooner we begin treatment, the better her chances." Treatment. The word sounded like hope, but hope came with a price, a very heavy one. The doctor explained the costs, the hospital visits, the medication. As he spoke, numbers filled the air like invisible weights, pressing down on my chest. I had some savings, but not enough. Not nearly enough, but we had 3 grown children, successful adults with good jobs and comfortable lives. We had spent decades building their future. Surely now they would stand beside us. Elena thought the same thing. On the way home, she tried to smile. "Maybe it's a blessing we have such wonderful children," she said softly. "They'll help us through this," I nodded, though something inside me felt uneasy. That evening we called them. First, our eldest son. He answered after a few rings, sounding impatient. "What's wrong?" he asked. I explained the situation slowly. I told him about the diagnosis, about the treatment the doctor recommended, about the costs. There was silence on the other end of the phone, not the kind of silence filled with concern, a cold silence. Finally he sighed. "Dad, I'm really busy right now. And honestly, medical problems like that are something people should prepare for themselves." I felt like I had misheard him. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. "I mean, it's your problem. I have my own responsibilities. Your problem." The words hit me like a slap, but I still believed maybe he was just shocked. Maybe he needed time. So we called our daughter. She listened for a moment, then said something that broke Elena's heart in a way I will never forget. "Mom, I'm sorry you're sick," she said flatly, "but I can't get involved in this. I have my own family and expenses. It's not fair to expect us to pay for something like that." Elena didn't speak. She simply stared at the floor. Still, there was one more child, our youngest. He had always been closest to his mother. Or so we thought, but when he heard the news, his response was even colder. "You guys need to handle your own problems," he said. Then he added the words that would echo in my mind forever. "It's your problem. 3 children. 3 identical answers. Not one of them asked how their mother felt, not one asked if she needed comfort, not one offered help. When the final call ended, the house fell into complete silence. Elena was still sitting on the sofa, holding the phone loosely in her hands. For a long time she didn't move. Then she forced a small smile and said something that shattered my heart. Maybe they're just scared, but I could see the tears slowly sliding down her cheeks. That night she cried quietly while pretending to sleep beside me. And for the first time in 35 years of marriage, I felt something inside me break, not because of the cancer, but because of the cruelty of the children we had spent our entire lives loving. I held Elena's hand in the darkness and whispered a promise to myself. No matter what happened next, I would never forget what they had done. After that night, the house felt different. It was the same house we had lived in for more than 30 years. The same walls, the same furniture, the same family photos hanging in the hallway. But something inside it had changed. The warmth was gone. Elena tried her best to pretend everything was normal. That was the kind of woman she had always been. She never wanted to be a burden to anyone, even now. Even after hearing her own children say those words, asterisk, it's your problem, asterisk, the next morning she woke up early, just like she always did. I found her in the kitchen again, standing by the window with a cup of tea in her hands. But she wasn't humming anymore. You should rest, I told her gently. She smiled at me. If I stop moving, she said quietly, I'll start thinking too much. I knew exactly what she meant. The doctor had already given us the treatment plan. Chemotherapy had to start soon. The sooner we began, the better chance she had. But the cost was enormous. We counted our savings again and again, hoping somehow the numbers would magically change. They didn't. I sold my old car first. It wasn't much, but it helped us schedule the first hospital visit. Elena protested when she found out. That car meant a lot to you. She said, you mean a lot more, I replied. The first chemotherapy session was harder than I expected. The hospital room smelled of chemicals and medicine. Elena sat quietly in the chair while nurses prepared the Roman four-line. She looked small there, smaller than I had ever seen her before. But she still smiled at the nurse. Thank you for taking care of me, she said politely. Even in her pain, she was thinking about others. The treatment began slowly. The clear liquid flowed into her veins through the thin tube. I sat beside her the entire time, holding her hand. At first, she seemed fine, but after a few hours the weakness began. Her face turned pale. Her fingers tightened around mine. Are you okay? I asked softly. She nodded, though I could see the pain in her eyes. I'm strong, she whispered. And she was stronger than anyone I had ever known. Days turned into weeks. Chemotherapy drained her energy more and more. The sickness came like waves. Some days she couldn't even stand without help. Her beautiful silver hair began falling out slowly. The first time she noticed strands on her pillow, she stared at them quietly. Then she laughed softly. Well, she said, I guess I'll finally know what I look like bald. But later that night I heard her crying in the bathroom. I stood outside the door, unable to do anything except listen and hate, not the disease, but the people who should have been there with us. Our children never called, not once. Sometimes Elena would sit by the phone in the evening. She never admitted it, but I knew she was hoping it would ring. That maybe one of them had changed their mind. Maybe one of them suddenly remembered that the woman fighting cancer was the same mother who once stayed awake all night when they had fevers. But the phone remained silent. One evening, as we sat together in the living room, Elena looked at the old family photos on the wall. There was one picture from many years ago, all 5 of us standing together at the beach. The kids were small then, laughing and running through the sand while Elena held their hands. She stared at that photo for a long time. They were such sweet children. She said quietly, They still are, I tried to say. But the words felt like lies. She turned toward me. Don't be angry at them. She whispered, How can I not be? Her eyes were gentle even now. They just forgot how much love matters. I couldn't understand how she could still defend them after everything they had done. But that was Elena. Her heart was too kind to hold hatred. As the weeks passed, her health continued to decline. Walking became difficult. Eating became painful. Some nights she woke up gasping from the pain spreading through her body. I held her through those nights, wishing I could take even a small part of her suffering. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, she looked at me with tired eyes. "Do you think they'll come visit?" she asked. My throat tightened. "I don't know," I admitted. She nodded slowly. "I just want to see them one more time." That sentence broke something inside me. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't asking for help. She only wanted to see the children she had given her entire life to. But they never came. And deep down, I started to realize something terrifying. We were fighting this battle completely alone. Just the two of us, and the woman I loved more than anything in this world was slowly losing the fight. The last week of Elena's life was the quietest week our house had ever known. By then, the illness had taken almost all of her strength. The chemotherapy that once gave us hope had become too much for her body to endure. The doctors had tried everything they could, but eventually one of them pulled me aside in the hospital hallway. I still remember the way he avoided my eyes. "You should prepare yourself," he said softly. "There isn't much time left." The words felt unreal. How could a life filled with love, sacrifice, and kindness simply end? When I returned to Elena's hospital room, she was staring out the window. The sunset painted the sky in warm orange colors, and for a moment she looked peaceful, as if she already knew. "You talked to the doctor," she said quietly. It wasn't a question. I sat beside her bed and held her fragile hand. It felt so light in mine now. "Yes," I admitted. She smiled gently. "It's all right," she whispered. "I'm not afraid," but I was. Terrified, not of being alone, but of losing the person who had been my entire world for 35 years. That evening she asked me something that made my heart ache. "Could you call the children again?" I hesitated. After everything they had said, after the cold way they had turned their backs on her, I didn't want to give them another chance to hurt her. But Elena still believed in them. She always had. "They should know," she said softly. "Maybe they'll want to come." So I made the calls. First, our eldest son. He answered after several rings, sounding distracted. "Dad, I'm at work. Can this wait?" "No," I said firmly. "Your mother is dying." There was a pause, a long, uncomfortable pause. Then he sighed. "I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm really busy right now. Traveling would be difficult." Traveling would be difficult. Those were the words he used to describe visiting his dying mother. I hung up without responding. "Next," I called our daughter. She sounded annoyed the moment she answered. "Dad, what is it now?" I told her the same thing. Her response was even colder. "I already told you I can't get involved. I have responsibilities. I hope the hospital takes good care of her." No emotion. No sadness, just distance. Finally, I called our youngest. For a brief moment, I hoped he might be different. But he wasn't. "Dad, I don't see what you expect me to do," he said. "These things happen. You'll have to deal with it. You'll have to deal with it." I stared at the phone for a long time after that call ended. 3 children, 3 chances to say goodbye, and none of them cared enough to take it. When I returned to Elena's room, she looked at me hopefully. "Are they coming?" she asked. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. "They're busy," I said quietly. "But they know." She nodded slowly. "I understand," she whispered. That night she held my hand tighter than usual. And early the next morning, Elena took her final breath. It happened peacefully. There was no struggle, no pain. She simply closed her eyes, and the gentle heartbeat that had loved our family for decades quietly stopped. The hospital room felt unbearably silent afterward. I sat there beside her for a long time, unable to move. Part of me still expected her to open her eyes again and smile the way she always did, but she never did. A few days later, we held the funeral. It was a small ceremony at the local cemetery. A handful of neighbors came, people who had known Elena for years. Some old friends from our neighborhood also attended. They brought flowers. They shared stories about her kindness. One neighbor even said something that stayed with me. "Your wife was the kind of person who made the world a little warmer." I believed that. Elena had spent her entire life making other people happy, but as I stood beside her coffin, I kept looking toward the cemetery gate, waiting, hoping maybe, just maybe, our children would appear at the last moment. Maybe guilt would finally bring them here. But the gate remained empty. The priest finished his prayer. The coffin was lowered slowly into the ground. And still they did not come, not one of them. When the ceremony ended, the guests slowly left until I was standing there completely alone. Just me and the freshly turned soil covering the woman I loved. The wind moved gently through the trees as I stared down at the grave. I thought about everything Elena had done for our children, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of love, and how easily they had abandoned her when she needed them most. Something inside me changed that day. Not anger, something colder, something stronger. I knelt beside her grave and placed my hand on the earth. "I'm sorry," I whispered, sorry that she had spent her final days hoping for children who never came. Sorry that she had believed in them until the very end. But as I stood there, another promise formed in my heart. A promise I spoke quietly to the silent cemetery. I won't let this go. They had treated their mother like she was nothing. Like her life meant nothing, but one day they would understand exactly what they had done. And when that day came, I would be waiting. 2 months passed after Elena's funeral. The house became unbearably quiet. For 35 years, every corner of that home had been filled with her presence. Her soft humming in the mornings, the smell of tea drifting from the kitchen, the warm light she seemed to carry wherever she went. Now there was only silence. Sometimes I would catch myself looking toward the kitchen doorway, expecting to see her standing there with that gentle smile. But of course she never appeared. Grief is a strange thing. It doesn't always come as loud crying or dramatic sorrow. Sometimes it sits quietly inside you, like a heavy stone that never moves. And every day I carried that stone. But along with the grief, something else had grown inside me, a memory of 3 voices on the phone. Asterisk, it's your problem. Asterisk, those words echoed in my mind again and again. At first, I wondered if our children would ever reach out after the funeral. Maybe guilt would finally catch up with them. Maybe one day the phone would ring, and I would hear regret in their voices. But the phone remained silent. Weeks passed, not a single call, not a single message to them. Their mother had disappeared from the world as easily as deleting an old photograph. Then one afternoon, something unexpected happened. My phone rang. I was sitting in the living room, staring absent-mindedly at one of Elena's old knitting baskets when the sound broke the silence. The caller ID showed my eldest son's name. For a moment, I simply stared at the screen. 2 months. 2 entire months without a word, and now suddenly he remembered my number. I answered slowly, "Hello." His voice sounded strangely polite. "Dad, how are you?" The question almost made me laugh. How was I? The man who had buried his wife alone while his children couldn't even be bothered to show up. "I'm alive," I replied calmly. There was an awkward pause. Then he cleared his throat. "Listen, I was actually hoping you could help me with something." "Of course." Not a call of apology, not a call of regret, a request. "What do you need?" I asked. "Well, my business ran into some financial trouble recently," he explained. "Just temporary problems? I know you still have the house and some savings. I was hoping you could lend me some money." For a few seconds I didn't speak. Then I realized something. He wasn't the only one calling. That same evening, my daughter contacted me. Her voice sounded nervous. "Dad, I heard you still have Mom's savings account. My husband and I are dealing with some debts right now. We thought maybe you could help us out." The next day, our youngest son called as well. His reason was different, but the request was the same. He needed help, money, support, the very things they had refused their mother when she was fighting for her life. It was almost unbelievable. For 2 months they had ignored my existence. But the moment they needed something, suddenly I mattered again. That night I sat alone in the living room, thinking about their requests. Elena's photograph rested on the table beside me. She was smiling in the picture, the way she always had, kind, gentle, full of love. For a moment I imagined what she might say. Elena would probably forgive them. She had always been able to forgive anything, but I wasn't Elena. The next morning I invited all 3 of them to come to the house. Surprisingly, they agreed. It was the first time they had stepped into that home since their mother died. When they walked through the door, something about their behavior immediately caught my attention. They looked uncomfortable. Not sad, just uncomfortable. Like people visiting a place they no longer belonged. We sat around the dining table. The same table where Elena had served thousands of family meals over the years. For a moment, none of them spoke. Finally, my eldest son cleared his throat. "So, Dad," he said carefully, "about the help we talked about." I raised my hand, stopping him. Before answering, I slowly stood up and walked toward the hallway. On the wall hung a large framed photo of Elena. I brought it back and placed it gently on the table in front of them. "Do you remember her?" I asked quietly. They exchanged awkward glances. "Of course we do," my daughter said. "Good," I replied. Then I looked each of them directly in the eyes. "Because when she was dying in a hospital bed, she remembered you too." Silence filled the room. "She asked about you every single day," I continued. "She hoped you would come visit. She wanted to see her children one last time." None of them spoke. Their eyes avoided mine. I leaned slightly forward. "But you didn't come." Still silence. "You didn't come to the hospital." I looked at my eldest son. "You didn't come to say goodbye." Then I looked at my daughter. "You didn't come to the funeral." Finally, I turned to the youngest. "And do you know what all 3 of you told me when I asked for help?" They knew the answer. I could see it in their faces. But I said it anyway. "You said it was asterisk, our problem asterisk." The room felt heavy with tension. Then my eldest son shifted in his chair. "Dad, that was different," he said weakly. I nodded slowly. Yes, I agreed it was. I stood up from the table. And for the first time since Elena's death, I felt completely calm. "Now you're asking for help," I said quietly. They waited, hoping, expecting. I looked at them one final time and repeated the same words they had once used for their dying mother. "Your problems." I paused for just a moment. "Our asterisk asterisk, your problems asterisk asterisk." The shock on their faces was almost unbelievable. But I felt no guilt, no regret, just a strange sense of justice. They had abandoned the woman who loved them most in this world. And now, for the first time in their lives, they would have to face the consequences of their own cruelty.